The sand was cold against her cheek. That was the detail Priya Sharma would remember later, in those final moments when memory became the only possession left to her. Cold sand in a desert that burned under daylight, now dark and infinite under a moonless sky. She tried to lift her head, tried to understand how she had arrived here, but the journey back through time required more strength than her body could summon. So instead, she lay still and thought about chai, about the way her mother made it every morning in their Pune kitchen, boiling the milk just long enough, adding cardamom and ginger, the steam rising in spirals that caught the early light. She thought about Deepa's last hug at the airport, those thin arms that held her so tight, the whispered words she should have heeded. She thought about the moment she first saw his message, glowing on her phone screen at midnight in her Mumbai apartment, and how something in her chest had lifted, had opened, had believed. And she thought about how trust, once weaponized, becomes the sharpest blade of all. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Every ending has a beginning, and Priya's story began not in the desert but in a one-bedroom apartment in Bandra, where she lived alone with her ambitions and her loneliness and her slowly fading hope that love might still find her. Priya was 32 years old and tired in ways that sleep could not fix. She worked as a marketing consultant for a mid-sized firm, the kind of job that sounded impressive to her parents but felt increasingly hollow to her. She was good at it. Perhaps too good. Her days blurred together in a rhythm of client meetings and campaign strategies and late nights staring at analytics that told her how to make people want things they did not need. She earned well enough to afford her own place, to send money home each month, to maintain the independence she had fought her family for. But independence, she was learning, could feel a lot like isolation. Her mornings began the same way, alarm at 6:30. 20 minutes of yoga she only half committed to, shower. The same breakfast of oats and fruit. Then the calls. Her mother phoned every morning at 7:15, a routine established years ago and now unbreakable. They talked about nothing important, what Priya ate, whether she was sleeping enough, when she might visit Pune, and beneath every word, the unasked question her mother was too polite to voice daily but made clear in other ways. When would Priya settle down, marry, give them grandchildren, stop this exhausting pursuit of a life that seemed to lead nowhere but back to an empty apartment? The arranged marriage meetings had become a joke Priya could no longer laugh at. Her parents meant well, they truly did. But the men they found were always the same. Engineers or doctors or businessmen who looked at her resume before they looked at her face, who asked about her career with a mix of admiration and concern, who wanted a wife modern enough to impress their friends but traditional enough to not threaten their authority. She had sat through dozens of these meetings. Coffee shops in Bandra, restaurants in Kolaba, stiff conversations where both parties performed interest while calculating compatibility like a business merger. The last one had been 3 months ago. His name was Rohit. He worked in finance. He was handsome in a generic way, polite, accomplished. They met at a cafe near her office and talked for exactly 45 minutes. He asked about her work. She asked about his. He mentioned that his mother lived with him and would continue to do so after marriage. She mentioned that she valued her independence. He smiled and said that was fine, as long as she understood that family came first. She smiled back and knew there would not be a second meeting. That night she deleted the matrimonial app her mother had convinced her to download and poured herself a large glass of wine and wondered if this was all there was. Work and duty and the slow erosion of hope. But humans are resilient creatures, or perhaps just stubborn ones. Priya did not want to give up on love, on connection, on the possibility that somewhere in this vast and crowded world there existed someone who might see her fully and choose her anyway, so she returned to the international dating apps she had experimented with before. Not the matrimonial sites with their explicit focus on caste and salary and family background, but the ones that promised genuine connection, that claimed to use algorithms to find your soulmate, that showed you profiles of people from around the world. She was not naive. She had heard the stories. Catfishing, scammers, men who pretended to be wealthy foreigners to extract money from lonely women. She considered herself too smart for that, too educated, too careful. She set her filters high. She swiped left on anyone who seemed too polished, too perfect, too eager. She looked for red flags in profiles and bios and first messages. She told herself she was in control. And then she saw his profile. Sheikh Rashid Al-Mansour. The name itself carried weight, exoticism, a hint of fairy tale. His photos were tasteful, not excessive. One showed him in traditional white robes, standing against a sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Another captured him in a tailored navy suit at what appeared to be a charity gala, his expression serious and kind. There was one with a little girl, her face turned away from the camera, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture so tender it made Priya's chest ache. His bio was brief: widower, father, businessman. Looking for someone real in a world of pretense. She almost swiped left. It seemed too perfect, too much like a fantasy designed to trap the unwary. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes in that first photo, a quality she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror. Maybe it was the simplicity of his bio, the lack of bragging that characterized so many profiles. Maybe it was just loneliness making her reckless. She swiped right. They matched instantly. His first message came within minutes. Priya, beautiful name. It means beloved, doesn't it? She felt a small thrill at his attention, at the fact that he had looked up the meaning of her name. They began talking that night, and the conversation flowed with an ease that surprised her. He asked questions that went beyond the superficial. What did she read? What made her laugh? What did she dream about when she allowed herself to dream? She found herself answering honestly, more honestly than she had with anyone in months. Rashid told her his story in pieces over the following weeks. He was 41, born in Bahrain to a prominent family with business interests in real estate and construction across the Gulf. He had married young, a love match his family had opposed but eventually accepted. His wife Layla had died of cancer 4 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter Amara alone. He spoke of grief with a rawness that felt genuine, described the loneliness of being surrounded by family and business associates, but having no true partner, no one who understood the man beneath the titles and wealth. He was careful never to rush. Their conversations happened on his schedule, but he always apologized for the time differences, for the demands of his work. He sent good morning messages when it was evening in Mumbai, asked about her day with genuine interest, remembered small details she had mentioned in passing. He made her feel seen in a way that was intoxicating after years of feeling invisible. The first gift arrived 3 weeks after they started talking. A book she had mentioned loving as a teenager, a worn paperback edition of The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, with a note in elegant handwriting. Priya, I found this in an old bookshop in Manama and thought of our conversation. Some stories stay with us. I hope ours is one of them. Rashid. She photographed the book and the note, sent it to Deepa with a string of excited emojis. Deepa's response was more measured. Sweet gesture. But be careful. You don't really know him yet. Priya dismissed the concern. She was being careful. She had not given Rashid her address. The package had been sent to her office. She had reverse image searched his photos and found nothing suspicious. She had Googled his name and found mentions of Al Mansour family businesses in Bahrain. Everything checked out. The video calls started in month 2. Seeing his face move, hearing his voice without the filter of text, made him real in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. He was handsome, not in the polished Bollywood way, but in a lived-in manner, his face marked by experience and sorrow and strength. He spoke English with a slight accent that made ordinary words sound like poetry. He called from his office, from his villa, once from his car as his driver navigated Bahrain's highways. Each setting reinforced the reality of his life, the legitimacy of his existence. And then came the call that changed everything. Rashid's daughter Amara appeared on screen, shy and sweet, 7 years old, with her father's eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Are you Auntie Priya? She asked in careful English. Baba talks about you all the time. Priya's heart melted. This was not a scammer. This was a real family, a real man, a real possibility for the future she had almost given up hoping for. Over the next months, Rashid wove himself into the fabric of her life. He sent flowers to her office on her birthday, making her colleagues jealous and curious. He video called at consistent times, creating a routine she came to depend on. He listened to her frustrations about work and offered thoughtful advice. He shared his own challenges managing family expectations and business pressures. He spoke of marriage not as a transaction but as a partnership, told her he wanted someone educated and independent, someone his daughter could look up to, someone who would be his equal. He was patient about physical intimacy in a way that seemed respectful rather than suspicious. When you come here, he would say, when we are together in person, then we will know if this is real. He involved her in his life, showing her virtual tours of Bahrain, of the villa where she might live, of Amara's school and his offices. He talked about the future with specificity that made it feel inevitable, how her parents would be taken care of, how she could continue her career if she wished, or focus on family if she preferred, how they would split their time between Bahrain and India, how love, real love, was worth any risk. Priya told her parents about Rashid after 4 months. She showed them his profile, played them voice messages, shared the background information she had gathered. Her father was skeptical at first, worried about cultural differences and the complications of marrying into a Gulf family. But Rashid handled it perfectly. He arranged a video call with her parents, spoke respectfully in formal Hindi he had apparently learned just for them, addressed her father as uncle and her mother as auntie, discussed his intentions with the seriousness of a traditional suitor. By the end of the call, even her father seemed convinced. Her friends were more divided. Deepa remained worried, kept asking why Rashid had never visited India, why it was always Priya who would have to travel to him. But Priya had explanations, Rashid's explanations, that sounded reasonable. His business commitments were intense. Amara's school schedule made travel difficult. There were cultural complications with him visiting India as a high-profile Gulf businessman, potential media attention that could complicate things. He wanted their first meeting to be special, private, in a place where they could truly get to know each other without the pressure of family watching their every move. 6 months after that first message, Rashid made it official. A video call where he knelt before the camera holding a velvet box. Inside it, a ring of diamonds and sapphires that caught the light like captured stars. "Priya Sharma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you come to Bahrain? Will you meet me in person? Will you let me prove that this is real, that we are real, that love can still exist in this cynical world?" She said yes. Of course she said yes. How could she not? Every doubt seemed petty in the face of 6 months of consistent attention, thoughtful gestures, emotional intimacy. Every warning from Deepa seemed like jealousy or overcaution. Priya booked her flight, bought new clothes, imagined her new life with the intensity of someone who had waited too long for happiness and now held it within reach. The night before she left, Deepa came over to help her pack. They sat on Priya's bed surrounded by open suitcases, and Deepa held her hands and said, "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll keep your phone charged and call me every single day. Promise me that if anything feels wrong, even slightly wrong, you'll leave immediately." Priya promised. She meant it, but she also believed with the certainty of someone in love that nothing would go wrong, that this was her fairy tale finally beginning, that the life she had dreamed of was waiting for her in Bahrain like a gift she had only to unwrap. Her mother cried at the airport. Her father blessed her with a hand on her head and told her to remember who she was, to stay strong, to call if she needed anything. Deepa hugged her so tight it hurt, whispered one final warning that Priya laughed off with the confidence of someone who believes they are in control of their story. The flight was long. Priya barely slept. She watched the progress of the plane on the seatback screen, watched India fall away behind her and the Arabian Gulf approach, and felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that seemed appropriate for someone about to meet their future husband for the first time. She clutched the small Ganesh pendant her mother had pressed into her palm at the airport, a protective talisman she did not quite believe in but wore anyway. She rehearsed what she would say when she saw Rashid, how she would smile, how she would embrace him, how their life together would begin with this perfect moment. The plane descended into Bahrain just after midnight. Through the window, Priya could see the lights of Manama spreading across the darkness like fallen stars. She gathered her things, checked her reflection in her phone camera, took a deep breath. This was it, the beginning of everything. She walked through the airport with her suitcase rolling behind her, scanning the arrivals area for Rashid's face, for his smile, for the arms that would finally hold her. Instead, she saw a stranger, a driver in a black suit holding a sign with her name printed in neat letters. No Rashid, no Amara, no warm welcome. Just this silent man who took her suitcase without greeting and gestured for her to follow. Her phone buzzed as she walked toward the exit. A message from Rashid. "My darling, I am so sorry. Emergency at one of my sites. I will be there as soon as I can. Driver will bring you to the villa. Rest we will celebrate tomorrow. I promise." Something cold moved through Priya's chest. Something that felt like the first whisper of doubt. But she pushed it away. Emergencies happened. Business was unpredictable. This was fine. Everything was fine. She followed the driver into the warm Bahrain night, climbed into the back of a black SUV with tinted windows, and watched the airport lights disappear behind her as they drove into darkness. She tried calling Deepa, but her Indian SIM had no signal yet. She would text when she reached the villa, she told herself. She would call in the morning. Everything would be fine. The villa was not downtown as she had imagined. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city lights behind, entering areas that grew progressively more isolated, until finally they turned through gates into a walled compound. The building was beautiful in the way of expensive things that lack warmth. Marble and glass and ornate furnishings that looked rarely used. The driver carried her suitcase inside, set it in the foyer, and left without a word. Priya stood alone in the silence and felt the first real stab of fear. This was not the home Rashid had shown her on video calls. This was not the warm family villa with Amara's drawings on the refrigerator and photos on the walls. This was something else entirely. She called Rashid. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. She looked for Wi-Fi to connect to. The network was locked, password protected. She searched for her luggage to find her international adapter, thinking she would charge her phone and try to get data working, but her suitcase was gone. The driver had taken it. And that was when Priya Sharma, standing alone in a strange house in a foreign country with no phone signal and no way to contact anyone, finally understood that she had made a terrible mistake, that every warning she had dismissed, every doubt she had pushed away, every red flag she had explained away had been true. That love, or what she had believed was love, had led her not to a new life but into a trap. She walked through the villa, opening doors, looking for another person, for a phone, for any way to contact the outside world. And in the third bedroom she tried, she found them. 3 women, all Indian, all young, all staring at her with eyes that held no surprise, only a terrible, weary recognition. They had been waiting for her. Another one, another victim, another woman who had believed in love and found only betrayal. The oldest one, maybe 35, with exhausted eyes and a fading bruise on her cheek, spoke first. Her voice was flat, emptied of emotion by repetition. Let me guess. He promised you marriage, called himself a sheikh, showed you a daughter, made you believe you were special. Priya could not speak, could only nod. The woman smiled without humor. Welcome to hell. The first night, Priya did not sleep. She sat with the 3 women in that bedroom that smelled of fear and cheap air freshener, and listened to stories that mirrored her own with such precision. It felt like a script they had all been handed, lines they had all been fed, a play where only the actors changed, but the tragedy remained the S. Amy. Their names were Anjali, Kavita, and Mera. They ranged in age from 28 to 36, all educated, all employed, all from different Indian cities, all lured by men who might have been the same person wearing different names, or might have been different men working from the same playbook. The details varied slightly, but the architecture of the deception was identical. Online dating platforms, months of courtship, video calls that showed lavish homes and promised futures, gifts and attention, and the slow construction of trust. And then the invitation, come to Bahrain, come to Dubai, come to Kuwait, come meet me, come start our life together, come. Anjali had arrived first, 3 months ago. She was from Delhi, worked in software development, had matched with someone calling himself Khalid bin Abdullah. He had courted her for 8 months, even longer than Rashid had courted Priya, patient, meticulous. He sent her jewelry, called her parents, discussed marriage arrangements, talked about the wedding they would have in both India and the UAE to honor both cultures. When she arrived in Dubai, excited and nervous and full of hope, a driver met her just as one had met Priya, took her to a villa, left her alone, and when Khalid finally appeared, he was nothing like the man from the video calls. Older, harder, hauled. He took her passport, he took her phone. He told her the truth with the casual brutality of someone who had done this many times before. She was merchandise now. Her family would be contacted, money would be demanded. If they paid, she might go home. If they did not pay, she would be sold. Simple economics, supply and demand. Kavita was from Bangalore, 28 years old. A graphic designer who had believed she was flying to Bahrain to marry a businessman named Faisal. Her story was the same. 8 months of courtship, video calls with a beautiful child who called her auntie, promises of a life better than anything India could offer. She had arrived 6 weeks ago, hopeful and terrified and deeply in love with a man who did not exist. The real Faisal, if that was even his name, had taken one look at her and laughed, told her she was prettier than her photos, told her she would fetch a good price, told her to behave and she would not be hurt. She had screamed. They had drugged her. When she woke up, her head was shaved. A punishment, a warning, a way to break her spirit and reduce her value simultaneously. Mira was the most recent before Priya, arrived just 10 days ago from Hyderabad. She was a teacher, 31, had been pursued by someone calling himself Ahmed for nearly a year. The longest courtship of all. The most careful. He had even visited India once, or claimed to, sending her photos from Mumbai and Delhi, though he never actually met her in person, always citing last-minute complications. She had believed completely, had quit her job, had told her family she was moving to Qatar to start her new life. The betrayal was so fresh, she could barely speak it without crying. She told Priya in whispers how she had tried to run the second day, had gotten as far as the compound gates before the guards caught her. They had not beaten her, but they had shown her what would happen if she tried again. A small room, chains, darkness, a woman screaming somewhere deeper in the house. Mira had not tried to escape since. They told these stories in the darkness of that first night with Priya sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, her mind refusing to process the magnitude of what was happening. This could not be real. This was not possible. She had been careful, she had checked, she had verified. But even as she thought these things, she knew they were lies she was telling herself. The same lies these women had told themselves. The same lies that every victim tells in the moment when reality shatters the illusion of safety. Morning came with footsteps. Heavy, male. The women immediately tensed, moved away from the door, pressed themselves against the far wall like animals who had learned what happened when they were too close, too visible, too present. The door opened. A man entered, not Rashid. Priya had never seen him before. He was perhaps 50, thick around the middle, with cold eyes that assessed them with the detachment of someone examining livestock. He spoke in Arabic to someone outside the room. Then in English, heavily accented to the women, "New girl, come." Priya did not move, could not move. Anjali touched her shoulder, squeezed gently, whispered, "Go. It is worse if you resist." So Priya stood on legs that shook and followed the man out of the room, down a hallway she had not seen the night before, into an office that might have belonged to any businessman anywhere. Desk, computer, filing cabinets. Except for the heavy curtains that blocked the windows and the locks on the inside of the door, Rashid sat behind the desk, or the man she had known as Rashid. Seeing him in person after months of video calls was surreal. He looked the same, handsome, well-groomed. The same face that had smiled at her from her phone screen, that had told her he loved her, that had promised her a future. But there was nothing in his eyes now, no warmth, no recognition, just appraisal. He gestured to a chair. Priya did not sit. "What is this?" she asked, and her voice came out stronger than she expected. "Where is Amara? Where is your daughter? What is happening?" Rashid smiled. It was the smile of someone enjoying a private joke. "There is no Amara," he said. "There is no daughter. There is no wife who died of cancer. There is only business. And you, Priya Sharma, are now part of that business." The room tilted. Priya gripped the back of the chair to stay upright. "I want my phone. I want my passport. I want to leave." "You want many things," Rashid said, standing now, walking around the desk with the leisure of someone who held all the power. "But what you want is no longer relevant. Let me explain how this works. Your family will be contacted. They will be told you are safe, but that there have been complications, a misunderstanding, a debt you did not know about. They will be asked for money, not a large amount. We are not greedy, maybe 3 lakh rupees, maybe 5, depends on what we think they can pay. If they pay quickly, you go home with a story about a terrible mistake, a man who was not what he seemed, and your reputation mostly intact. If they do not pay, or if they go to the police, things become more complicated." "They will go to the police," Priya said. "My friend knows I am here. People will look for me." Rashid laughed. Actually laughed. "Your friend knows you came to Bahrain to marry a man you met online. When your family is contacted, they will be told you are safe and happy, but need money to settle some unexpected expenses before the wedding. They will believe this because they want to believe it, because the alternative is too terrible, and by the time they suspect something is wrong, you will be somewhere else. We move the girls regularly. This villa, another compound, sometimes a yacht, sometimes a house in Rifa. Bahrain is a small country but very easy to hide people in when you know the right people to pay." Priya felt the fight drain out of her. This was not a spontaneous crime. This was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was organized, professional, a business model refined through repetition. "How many?" she whispered. "How many women have you done this to?" "Enough," Rashid said. "India is a big country, full of educated women who want more than what they have. Women tired of arranged marriages and small-minded men. Women who dream of romance and adventure. Women like you, smart enough to be selective, lonely enough to be vulnerable, perfect." The worst part was how he said it, not with cruelty but with a kind of admiration, as if he respected them for the very qualities he exploited. As if this was all a game and he was simply better at playing it than they were. He returned to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out Priya's passport and phone, held them up. "These belong to me now. You belong to me. The sooner you accept this, the easier it will be. He pressed a button on his desk. The door opened. The same heavy man from before entered. Take her back. Let her think about cooperation. Priya was led back to the bedroom. The other women looked at her with sympathy that felt worse than pity. They knew. They had been through this same conversation, this same moment of realization. Anjali pulled her down to sit on one of the thin mattresses that served as beds. Did he give you the speech? About cooperation? Priya nodded. She could not speak yet. The magnitude of it was crushing her. She was not in Bahrain. She was not anywhere. She was erased, removed from the world, held in a space that existed outside normal reality where laws and rights and human dignity meant nothing. The days blurred together after that. Time moved strangely in the villa, stretched and compressed by monotony and fear. The women were kept in the bedroom most of the time, let out only to use the bathroom under supervision or to eat meals that were brought to them on trays, plain food, rice and lentils, sometimes chicken, enough to keep them alive and reasonably healthy. Merchandise had to be maintained. Priya learned the routines, learned which guards were cruel and which were merely indifferent, learned that noise brought punishment so they spoke in whispers, learned that the door was locked from outside but the windows were barred and opened onto a walled courtyard with no exit, learned that other women came and went, brought to the villa for a few days or weeks before being moved elsewhere. Some were ransomed and sent home. Some disappeared into marriages arranged for elderly Gulf nationals who paid well for young, educated Indian brides they could control. Some were moved to other countries, other situations Priya did not want to imagine. She learned Kavita's full story over those first days. How her family had paid the ransom almost immediately, desperate to get their daughter back. But then Rashid had increased the demand, said there were additional fees, processing charges, travel expenses. The family had borrowed money, sold jewelry, paid again, and again. Each time promised it was the last payment. Each time lied to. Eventually, they ran out of money, out of things to sell. Kavita was still here, her shaved head growing back in patches, her spirit broken into pieces too small to reassemble. Anjali told Priya about her escape attempt in month 2, how she had pretended to be sick, waited until she was taken to the bathroom, then ran, made it out of the villa, made it to the compound gate, screamed for help at passing cars on the road beyond. No one stopped. The guards caught her within minutes. The beating had been methodical, professional, enough to hurt, to terrify, to teach, but not enough to damage the merchandise too badly. She still limped slightly, still flinched at sudden movements. Mira was the quietest. She spent hours staring at nothing, lost inside her own trauma. Sometimes she cried silently. Sometimes she spoke to herself in Telugu, conversations with people who were not there. The drugs they had given her when she first arrived had done something to her mind. Or maybe it was just the psychological break that comes from having your entire reality inverted in a single moment. Teacher to captive, bride to commodity, human to object. Priya tried to stay strong, tried to think of ways to escape, to signal for help, to somehow get word to Deepa or her parents. But every plan crumbled under the weight of reality. No phone, no internet, no way to communicate with the outside world. Guards always present, doors always locked. And even if she somehow got out of the villa, where would she go? She did not speak Arabic, did not know Bahrain, had no money, no documents, would be picked up immediately as an illegal immigrant and likely returned to her captors who had connections in the local police. The realization of how carefully this system had been designed was suffocating. Every vulnerability had been anticipated. Every possible resistance had been planned for. This was not the work of amateurs. This was trafficking as industry, as business, as system. On the 5th day, Rashid returned. This time he brought another man, older, distinguished-looking in an expensive suit. They spoke in Arabic while looking at Priya and the other women as if they were not human enough to deserve privacy. Then Rashid switched to English. This is Mr. Hassan. He is interested in marriage. He has been looking for an educated wife, someone who can speak English, help with his business interests. I told him about you, Priya. He is willing to pay well. The man, Hassan, stepped forward, looked at Priya the way one might examine a car before purchase. Stand up, he said. She did not move. He said it again, sharper. Rashid nodded to a guard. The guard grabbed Priya's arm, hauled her to her feet roughly. Hassan walked around her, commented on her height, her build, her skin tone, all in Arabic to Rashid, who nodded and responded. Then Hassan asked her directly, "You have degree. You work in marketing. I am not marrying you, Priya said. I am not marrying anyone. I am being held here against my will. This is illegal. Hassan looked at Rashid. Rashid shrugged. Hassan turned back to Priya. Legal, illegal, these are flexible concepts here. You can marry me willingly and have a comfortable life. Or you can continue to be difficult and end up somewhere much worse. Your choice. I choose neither, Priya said. Hassan smiled without warmth. Then you choose poorly. He said something to Rashid in Arabic, nodded, and left. Rashid followed him out. The guard shoved Priya back down onto the mattress and left, locking the door behind him. Anjali touched Priya's shoulder. You should have been polite, she said quietly. Now they will make an example of you. Let them, Priya said, though she was shaking. I will not cooperate. I will not make this easy. But even as she said it, she knew it was bravado, knew that resistance here was not heroic but simply prolonged suffering. The system was designed to break them. Time, isolation, degradation, fear. It worked. She could see it had worked on Kavita, on Mira, even on Anjali, who still had some fight left but had learned to hide it, to survive through submission. That night, Priya lay awake listening to Kavita's quiet crying and Mira's whispered Telugu prayers and Anjali's steady breathing that came from practice sleeping in terrible places. She thought about Deepa, who by now would be worried, would be trying to call, would be getting no answer. She thought about her parents waiting for news of the wedding that would never happen. She thought about her apartment in Bandra sitting empty, her job wondering where she was, her life in India continuing without her as if she had simply been erased. And she thought about Rashid, about how perfectly he had played his role, how every word, every gesture, every gift had been calculated, how the daughter was probably a stock photo or a niece borrowed for video calls, how the villa he had shown her was likely a hotel suite or a borrowed space, how everything, every single thing had been a lie constructed so carefully that even now, knowing the truth, part of her wanted to believe it had been real. That was the cruelest part. Not just that she had been fooled, but that she had wanted so badly to be fooled, had needed love so desperately that she had ignored every warning, explained away every inconsistency, chosen hope over caution. On the seventh day, they came for her. Not Rashid this time, but two men she had never seen before. They pulled her out of the bedroom while the other women watched in silent horror, dragged her down a different hallway, into a bathroom. One man held her while the other filled a tub with ice water. They shoved her in fully clothed, held her under until her lungs screamed, pulled her up gasping, asked if she was ready to cooperate. She said no. They shoved her under again, and again, and again, until cooperation seemed like a reasonable alternative to drowning, until the fight went out of her and only the animal instinct to breathe remained. When they finally pulled her out and dumped her shivering on the bathroom floor, one of them said in broken English, "Mr. Rashid says you think too much, need to learn to feel instead. Next time, worse." They left her there. Eventually Anjali came, helped her back to the bedroom, wrapped her in thin blankets, held her while she shook from cold and shock and the final shattering of her belief that willpower alone could protect her. This was the breaking point. The moment when Priya Sharma understood with absolute clarity that she was not going to be rescued, was not going to escape, was not going to wake up from this nightmare. She was going to die here, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, either through being sold into a marriage that would kill her slowly, or through resisting until they decided she was more trouble than she was worth and disposed of her the way one disposes of any merchandise that has lost its value. That night, wrapped in blankets that smelled of mildew and other women's fear, Priya finally cried. Not the silent tears she had shed before, but great wrenching sobs that came from the deepest part of her, from the place where hope had lived and now only grief remained. Anjali held her. Kavita stroked her wet hair. Even Mira roused from her fog long enough to whisper that it would be okay, though they all knew it would not be okay, would never be okay again. They were the disappeared, the forgotten. The women who went looking for love and found only the abyss. The text message reached Priya's parents on day 9. It came from her number, which gave it credibility, made it feel real. The message was brief and perfectly calibrated. "Mom, Dad, I'm safe and so happy here. Rashid is wonderful. There's been a small complication with paperwork and wedding expenses. Can you send 4,000 rupees? I'll explain everything when I call soon. Love you both so much." Priya's mother wept with relief when she saw it. Her daughter was alive, was safe, was happy. The money seemed like nothing compared to that reassurance. Her father was more cautious, tried calling the number immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. He texted back asking Priya to call, to video chat, to prove it was really her. The response came an hour later. "Dad, I know you're worried. Phone issues here. Will call as soon as I can. Please trust me. This is important. Rashid's family is helping, but there are some traditional expenses I need to cover myself. It's complicated but normal here. Please send to this account." A bank account number followed. International, Bahraini. In Mumbai, Deepa was losing her mind. She had been calling Priya's phone for 8 days straight. No answer, no response to texts, no activity on social media. She had filed a missing person report with the Mumbai police, but they had been dismissive. Adult woman, left of her own free will. Went to meet a man she had been talking to for months, probably just busy with romance. Give it time. When Deepa insisted something was wrong, they had asked if she had proof of foul play. She did not. Just instinct. Just the absolute certainty that Priya would never go this long without contact. The police said to wait. Said that if there was no contact in another week, they would escalate. A week felt like eternity. Deepa reached out to Priya's parents, was told about the text message asking for money. Something in her chest went cold. "Don't send it," she said. "This is exactly what traffickers do. They take the women and then extort the families." But Priya's father had already done research, had found the Al Mansour family business listings, had seen the photos Priya had shown them, had spoken to Rashid on video call months ago. This was not trafficking. This was just wedding complications. Cultural differences. Maybe Priya was embarrassed to call because she needed money. Maybe she was busy with wedding preparations. The text said she was happy. "Then why hasn't she called you directly?" Deepa demanded. "Why just a text? Why can't she video chat even for 1 minute?" Priya's mother had started to cry again, this time from uncertainty rather than relief. Her father held firm. They would send half the amount, he decided, 200,000 rupees, as a show of good faith, and they would insist on speaking to Priya directly before sending more. This seemed reasonable, cautious but supportive. They transferred the money that afternoon. In the villa in Bahrain, Priya knew nothing of this. She existed now in a fog of fear and diminishing hope. The ice water torture had been 3 days ago, but she still shivered at random moments, still woke gasping from dreams of drowning. The resistance had gone out of her, replaced by a numb compliance that was easier than fighting. She ate when food came, used the bathroom when permitted, spoke little. The other women recognized this state. Anjali called it the breaking. Everyone went through it. The moment when the mind accepted what the heart refused to believe, that this was real, was permanent, was inescapable. But something in Priya had not broken completely. Some small spark of her former self still existed, buried deep beneath the trauma and fear. She watched the guards, noted their routines, memorized which doors they locked and which they merely closed, observed that there were certain hours, early morning, when fewer men were present. She shared none of this with the other women. They had been here too long, had tried and failed too many times. They would either try to stop her, or, worse, their hope might give them away, might alert the guards that something was being planned. On day 12, Rashid returned. He looked pleased. "Good news, Priya. Your family sent money. They love you very much. Want you to be happy. We will send another message soon asking for the rest. Maybe in a few weeks you can go home, if you cooperate." "I want to speak to them," Priya said. "Let me call my parents." "Soon," Rashid said, "when all the money is transferred. Then you can call and tell them what a wonderful time you had, how sorry you are for the misunderstanding, how you decided this life was not for you. They will believe you because they want to believe you, because the alternative destroys them." "You are a monster," Priya said quietly. Rashid smiled. "I am a businessman. You wanted a prince from a fairy tale. I gave you one. Not my fault you believed it. People believe what they want to believe. I just showed you what you wanted to see." He left. That night, Priya made her decision. She would not wait for ransom that might never come, for rescue that was not coming, for mercy from men who had none. She would try to escape. And if she failed, if they caught her and beat her, or worse, at least she would have tried. At least she would die knowing she had not simply surrendered to this nightmare. She waited 3 more days, watched the patterns, learned that the guards changed shifts at 5 in the morning, learned that there was a 15-minute window when the night guards left and the day guards had not yet arrived, when only one man remained in the villa, usually in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She told no one, not even Anjali, could not risk it. On day 15, Priya woke at 4:30. The other women still slept. She rose silently, went to the bathroom when the guard unlocked the door for morning ablutions, waited until he returned her to the bedroom. then watched through the crack under the door until she saw his shadow pass, heard his footsteps recede toward the kitchen. The shift change was beginning. The door was locked, but the lock was simple. Priya had been working on it for 2 days with the wire she had pulled from the mattress springs, bending it into a crude pick. She had no idea if it would work, but she had to try. She slid the wire into the lock, felt for the mechanism, twisted, nothing, tried again. Her hands shook. Sweat ran down her back despite the air conditioning. Behind her, Kavita stirred, mumbled something in her sleep. Priya froze, waited. Silence. One more try. The lock clicked. The door opened. Priya's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her chest. She slipped into the hallway, listened, heard nothing, no footsteps, no voices. She moved toward the front of the villa, remembering the route from that first night. The foyer, the main door, freedom. She reached the entrance. Tried the handle, locked. Of course it was locked, but there was a deadbolt on the inside, the kind that turns manually. She reached for it. Her fingers touched the metal. And then a hand grabbed her hair from behind, yanked her backwards so hard she fell, her head cracking against the marble floor. The guard stood over her, not the one from the kitchen. A different one, younger. She had miscounted, had missed someone in her surveillance. He shouted in Arabic. Footsteps came running. More men. Rashid appeared, still in pajamas, his face dark with rage. "Stupid girl," he said. "Stupid, stupid girl." They dragged her not to the bathroom this time, but outside, into the courtyard she had only seen through barred windows. Dawn was breaking, the sky turning from black to gray. Rashid spoke to the guards in rapid Arabic. One of them left, returned with rope. They tied Priya's hands behind her back, tied her ankles, left her kneeling on the concrete while Rashid made a phone call. Priya could hear Anjali screaming from inside the villa, screaming her name, screaming for them to stop. The sound cut off abruptly. Someone had silenced her. The other women would be terrified now, knowing what happened to those who tried to escape, what was about to happen as a lesson to them all. Rashid ended his call, crouched in front of Priya. "You have created a problem," he said conversationally. "Your family has been asking questions, going to the Indian embassy, making noise. We were going to send you home after the ransom was paid. Too risky now. You have become a liability." "Then let me go," Priya said. "I won't tell anyone. I'll say it was a misunderstanding." Rashid laughed. "You think you were the first to promise this? You think you are special. You will go to police the moment you are free. You will tell your story. Maybe nothing comes of it. Probably nothing comes of it. But maybe something does. Maybe it brings attention we do not need, cannot risk it." A vehicle pulled up outside the compound. Priya heard the gates open. An SUV entered. 2 men got out. They spoke to Rashid in Arabic. Money changed hands. Rashid pointed to Priya. The men nodded, came toward her. "Where are you taking me?" Priya asked, but she knew. She had always known how this would end. From the moment Anjali told her about the woman who had resisted and disappeared. From the moment she understood that women who became problems simply ceased to exist. They lifted her, still bound, and carried her to the SUV, threw her in the back like cargo. Rashid appeared at the vehicle's door, looked down at her with something that might have been regret or might have been annoyance at the inconvenience. "I want you to understand something," he said. "This is not personal. This is business. You were merchandise that lost value. This is what happens to merchandise that cannot be sold, cannot be ransomed, cannot be used. There is a place in the desert where problems are solved. It is efficient, quick. You will not suffer long." Priya wanted to scream, to beg, to fight, but her throat had closed with terror. All she could do was stare at him, at this man who had promised her love and was now calmly explaining her execution. "For what it is worth," Rashid continued, "you were never going to have the life you dreamed of. Not with me, not with anyone. The world is not kind to women who want too much. Better you learn this now than spend years learning it slowly." He stepped back, closed the door. The SUV began to move. Priya lost track of time. The vehicle drove for what felt like hours. The city fell away. Buildings gave way to scrubland, then to sand. The sun rose higher, turning the interior of the SUV into an oven. No one spoke. The 2 men in front occasionally passed a bottle of water between them, but offered none to Priya. She was already dead to them, already erased. Finally, the vehicle stopped. The desert stretched in every direction, empty and infinite and indifferent. The men got out, opened the back door, pulled Priya out and let her fall onto sand that was already hot despite the early hour. One of them lit a cigarette. The other checked his phone. They were waiting for something, or maybe just letting the fear settle, letting their victim understand completely before the end. Priya thought about many things in those final moments. She thought about her mother's chai and her father's blessing, and Deepa's hug at the airport. She thought about her apartment in Bandra and the marketing campaign she would never finish, and the life she had built that seemed so small and unsatisfying, but now felt precious beyond measure. She thought about all the choices that had led here, every decision and desire and dream that had culminated in this moment, bound and dying in a desert she had never wanted to see. She thought about the other women, Anjali, Kavita, Meera, the countless others who had come before and would come after. All the Indian women deceived by promises of love, by sheikhs who were not sheikhs, by fairy tales that were actually nightmares. She wondered if anyone would ever know, if her story would die with her in this desert, or if someday, somehow, the truth would emerge. One of the men finished his cigarette, ground it out in the sand, said something to his companion. They both approached Priya. She closed her eyes, thought one final prayer to a god she had stopped believing in years ago but now desperately needed to exist. If only so, this was not the end. If only so, there was something beyond this terror and waste. The last thing she heard was the safety clicking off a gun. The last thing she felt was sand, cold despite the rising sun, against her cheek. And then nothing. 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 3 months later, a group of Bahraini workers surveying for a new highway extension found remains in the desert, partially buried, scattered by scavengers. The authorities were called. Dental records were eventually obtained. The body was identified as Priya Sharma, Indian national, reported missing by her family. Cause of death: gunshot wound to the head. The case made brief headlines in India. Mumbai woman found dead in Bahrain. Love scam suspected. Deepa read the news on her phone while sitting in Priya's apartment, which she had been maintaining, paying rent on, keeping ready for her friend's return that would never come. She read the article twice, 3 times, and then she screamed until neighbors came knocking, screamed until her voice gave out. Screamed for her friend who had believed in love and found only betrayal, who had sought connection and found only murder. Priya's parents received the body 3 weeks later. The Indian embassy had worked to repatriate the remains. There was a funeral, a cremation. Ashes scattered in a river in Pune according to tradition. Her mother never recovered. Stopped eating, stopped speaking, died within the year of what the doctors called heart failure, but what everyone knew was grief. Her father became obsessed with justice, contacted lawyers, contacted journalists, contacted anyone who would listen. The Bahraini authorities were polite but unhelpful. No suspects, no leads. These things happen. Women should be more careful. The implicit blame made him furious but impotent. Of Rashid there was no trace. The phone number was disconnected. The social media profiles deleted. The business addresses fake or belonging to legitimate companies that had never heard of him. He had vanished like smoke, leaving only destruction behind. Somewhere he was already creating new profiles, new identities, courting new victims with the same practiced words and manufactured emotions. The other women from the villa scattered to various fates. Kavita was eventually ransomed after her family borrowed against their house and sold everything they owned. She returned to Bangalore but never spoke of what happened, refused therapy, refused interviews. Shaved her head again by choice and became a different person, someone harder and colder and unreachable. She never dated again, never married, lived alone and silent with her trauma. Anjali disappeared into forced marriage with a Bahraini man who needed a visa scheme to launder his multiple citizenships. She was given documents, a new name, a new identity. Her family was told she had decided to stay in the Gulf, had found love after all. They never heard her real voice again. Only occasional text from a number they could not verify, messages that might have been from her or might have been from her captors. They chose to believe she was alive and happy because the alternative was unendurable. Meera's fate remained unknown. She was moved from the villa the day after Priya's escape attempt and was never heard from again. No body was found, no ransom demand was made. She simply ceased to exist in any official capacity. One more woman who went missing in the vast networks of human trafficking that operate in the shadows of gleaming Gulf cities. Deepa started a campaign, created a website dedicated to Priya's memory and to warning other women about romance scams targeting educated Indian women. She collected stories from families who had lost daughters, sisters, friends to similar schemes. The site was visited by thousands but changed little. The scams continued. The men adapted, used different platforms, different names, different approaches. But the fundamental architecture remained the same. Find lonely women, offer them love, lure them abroad, exploit them. She gave interviews to news channels, but they aired late at night or were buried in digital editions. The story did not fit the narrative India wanted to tell about itself. Strong, modern women falling for scams, educated professionals being trafficked. It suggested vulnerability, suggested that all the progress and independence and empowerment was still no protection against predators who understood human longing better than their victims understood their own hearts. The government issued warnings. The Ministry of External Affairs added alerts to their travel advisories, but they were generic, easily ignored by women who believed they were different, smarter, more careful than the victims they read about. Priya herself had been careful. She had checked backgrounds, verified details, taken precautions. It had not mattered. The deception was too sophisticated. The need for love too powerful. The manipulation too precise. 5 years later, Deepa sat in a coffee shop in Bandra and watched a young woman at the next table video chatting with someone, laughing, showing her phone to her friend with excitement. "He's so sweet," the woman said. "He's a businessman in Dubai. We've been talking for 4 months. He wants me to visit." Her friend squealed with excitement, asked to see his photo, called him handsome, asked when the wedding would be. Deepa wanted to intervene, wanted to grab the woman's phone and show her Priya's story, show her the website, show her the statistics on women who disappeared into the Gulf after meeting men online. But she had tried this before. Women got defensive, said they were being careful, said their situation was different, said love was worth the risk. They never believed it would happen to them, just as Priya had never believed it would happen to her. So Deepa sat silent, drank her coffee, and prayed that this woman, this laughing, confident woman so much like Priya had been, would be lucky, would be safe, would be one of the ones who found genuine love instead of a shallow grave in the desert. But she knew the odds, knew that somewhere, in a villa in Bahrain or Dubai or Kuwait or Riyadh, other women were already trapped, were already discovering that the men who promised them everything planned to leave them with nothing, were already learning that love, or what they had mistaken for love, was actually the most efficient weapon ever devised for destroying hope. And somewhere else, men like Rashid were crafting new profiles, selecting new photos, writing new bios, preparing to send new messages to new victims who would read them at midnight and feel something in their chests, lift, open, believe. The cycle continuing, the machinery of deception grinding forward. The desert waiting patiently to receive its next offering of dreams turned to dust, and women who wanted nothing more than to be loved and found instead that wanting anything at all in this world could be fatal. Priya's story ended in the sand, but the story of women like her, women deceived and destroyed by the promise of love, continues, will continue, until the world values women's lives more than it values men's profits, until loneliness stops being a commodity to exploit, until love stops being weaponized. Until then, the desert keeps its secrets, and the traffickers keep their freedom, and the families keep their grief, and the women keep disappearing one by one into the terrible machinery of hope turned horror. The end.